Hello, welcome to another World of UX podcast. I'm your host, Darren Hood. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. A special welcome always to those of you listening for the first time. Welcome to the show. We are in the midst of a series, the series that I am calling Harsh Truths about or of UX maturity. We are talking about UX maturity, which is something that a lot of people are familiar with. Some people are not, but a lot of people are familiar with this topic, but they usually only hear it from a couple of angles at the most. Usually, when people talk about UX maturity, they're talking about how UX is respected and received and supported within an organization. And that's usually it. And you usually see a rating. We'll talk about some of those. By the way, I'm not doing this in sequence. I'm just talking about different topics as we move through this particular series. But they have some models, a lot of models out there. If you do a search on your favorite search engine for UX maturity, you're going to find, especially if you go to an images portion of a particular search engine, you will see a lot of visual representations or just breakdowns of UX maturity. They talk about where the organization is, whether or not it's there's hostility toward UX maturity, whether or not you have a champion in the organization with regard to UX maturity, whether or not UX maturity is embedded in that organization's operations. A lot of different mindsets with regard to UX maturity. The problem with that generic approach and mindset, and let me take a step back. If that's all you know, fine. That's okay. I don't know anybody that's talking about UX maturity the way that I'm talking about it today. If you're just looking at it from a perspective of the organizational take only, which I did for years, which a lot of us have done for years, and that's it. When that happens, you're actually missing out on several other aspects of the discipline. You're missing out on personal UX maturity. You're missing out on UX maturity as it pertains to specific initiatives within an organization. You're missing out when it comes to the way that your team is graded from a UX maturity standpoint. You're missing out on discipline-wide UX maturity. You're missing out on educational or academically oriented UX maturity. Folks, UX maturity spans a lot of different things and not just as it pertains to the organization. In this particular series, I'm looking at UX maturity from a lot of different standpoints and even beyond the different levels I just mentioned, because you have UX maturity is representative of a lot of layers with regard to each initiative that you have. You have UX maturity coming from a stakeholder, the UX maturity of the project, UX maturity of the team members, varying levels of UX maturity. If you have 3 team members on your UX team, they have 3 different levels of UX maturity. And all of these different levels of UX maturity, the organization, all the different layers of UX maturity, all the different levels that each contributing factor has, those come together and they really directly impact the trajectory of a given initiative, any given initiative at any given time. And this is what we're doing right now. So in the Harsh Realities series, and by the way, I am shortening the title on these because it got really long. I started typing Harsh Realities of UX Maturity, and then there's a subtopic that I'm covering. So going forward, beginning with this part 4 of this series, we're not going to say harsh realities anymore, anything of that sort. We're just going to use the subtopic. It'll be presented, if you haven't, by the way, been out to the new and improved worldous.com website, you can actually listen to and search for any episode, any topic that we're covering on the World of UX podcast. You can actually go out there and find any of them, and you can listen there without going anywhere else. It doesn't get any better than that. That's pretty cool. I think it's pretty handy, very, very user-friendly, very practical. So you can go out there and do that. But we are, again, beginning with part 4, beginning with this episode, we will no longer use the direct reference to harsh realities of UX maturity. We're just going to present the subtopic, and then in the description, we will talk about the fact that this is part of the harsh reality series. How about that? So we make it a little bit easier for people to understand what we're going to get into, and not these long, drawn out titles. Not very good, not very helpful. So we're not going to do that. So just explaining that today. That said, last week I talked about how I was going to share some stories, and we were talking about UX maturity and the work. And I shared a story and all of these stories will be mine. If it's a story that comes from somebody else, I will make sure to share that. I'm actually thinking about having some guests on to talk about this. But we started off talking about UX maturity and the work, and we're still talking about UX maturity and the work because that story got so long, and I was going to tell several stories last week, but it got so long that, you know what? Nah, we're not going to do that. We're going to split all these up. So I'm going to tell several stories for this part of the series, and I've got another one for you today. And because these stories will get really long, I'm just going to share one story with each episode today. And so, yeah, we're talking about UX and the work, but we're talking about it from a different angle today. So I got a separate subtopic for you today. And that subtopic is UX maturity and the cult of wow. That's what we want to talk about today. UX maturity and the cult of wow. Again, this is Darren Hood, the host of the World of UX podcast. I'm going solo. Today, we're going to have some people. My schedule's starting to free up. We're going to have some guests on again in the not too distant future. But again, tonight is just going to be me. And there's not going to be any visuals. I'm just going to be talking to you. So those of you that are listening, not watching, with the exception of my facial expressions, hand gestures, and the different things that are going on, you're not missing anything supportive if you're looking at this particular episode. But those of you, thank you. Those of you who do watch on YouTube, those of you who do watch on Spotify, you folks can see the video. So again, tonight we want to talk to you about UX and the cult of wow. Now, what do I mean? UX maturity, I should say, and the cult of wow. What do I mean by that? It is known that when you're talking about UX, a lot of people are aware, a lot of people are taught, a lot of people are familiar with the concept that providing a good user experience is about one of the goals that we have is to generate delight when it comes to our customers, when it comes to our users. Now, for some reason, and it always happens, somebody with a low level of UX maturity, by the way, they take that word delight and they flip it. They take that word delight and they put a spin on it. They take that word delight, and now what people are doing is they are changing the word delight and they're talking about, wow. We want something that's going to make our customers say, wow. So we've gone beyond delight. And now we've turned delight into wow. Now, what is delight? From the perspective of doing real UX work. Because remember, UX is basically, good UX is invisible. It's invisible. Good UX doesn't make people go, wow. Wow is reserved for people who are engaging in some type of trickery. Wow is reserved for people who are engaging in some type of manipulation. Wow is reserved for people who are trying to play a game, snake oil sales, doing something that's not really reflective of what people were trying to do when they came to your site, to your solution, engaged with your product or service, and were just trying to fulfill a need. They had a mental model, they had a set of expectations, and they were just coming and trying to do a particular thing. And as long as they can do what they were trying to do, they're happy. That's what delight is. Delight is this calm, yeah, I did what I was trying to do. Very calm, very collected, very level-headed. There's no wow, there's no backflips associated with wow. I mean, think about it. We talked about the .com bust recently. One of the talks I did, I got some other recordings. We're going to be going back to the well with the talk circuit soon too, because of course when I do a series, I don't provide it straight through. This is going to be a relatively long series, and I did a talk recently and I gave another take on the history. I shared a timeline of what happened. And when you look back at the dot-com bust, and we'll have the story for you, we'll start that in a few moments. But when you look back at the dot-com bust, a lot of people were coming to websites, and there wasn't a whole lot of wow in 1997, 1998. I mean, the internet by itself was a wow. But one of the reasons that we had the dot-com bust was because people were going to, it was mostly website. There were no mobile apps back then. People were just going to websites, and there would be a lot of times some kind of a macromedia flash, a splash page is what it was called. You go to the homepage of a site, and there was a lot of flashing and a lot of colors and a lot of things, and people would go, wow. But the reason that there was a bust was because people would go to these sites and they had a mental model, they had expectations, they had something they wanted to accomplish, they had something they wanted to learn, they had something they wanted to discover, and they were being kept from doing it because a lot of the designs, or very few of them, were very user-centered. It was all about that company, that brand, basically doing some kind of dancing a jig, so to speak, and doing something that was sensationalistic, but it wasn't practical. There was a gross lack of practicality when the dot-com bust happened. And so people eventually, they got their fill of it, they were tired of it. And so you had a lot of the sites, a lot of the experiences on the internet, they failed to match the mental models, and very few companies were trying to be user-centered. Very few companies were trying to match those mental models. They were not delivering. Look back at Amazon. Now we know who Amazon is today. One of the reasons that Amazon succeeded is because, and I've said this, I've said this on this show a lot, I've said it in a lot of talks. Amazon made it a point to understand what the mental models were of the users, and they conducted research. They looked at the information architecture. They started to understand what information architecture was. They paid Semantic Studios, the company that Lou Rosenfeld and Peter Morville were behind back in the day, made it a point to understand what the mental models were, what users were actually trying to do, and they embedded those things into the designs. And so the wow, they understood what delight was, and they made sure that they matched what people were trying to do easily. They made sure that things were intuitive, the experiences were intuitive. They made sure I'm trying to find a book, I'm trying to find a particular product. They made it very simple. And they would come to the site. There was no wow, slam, bang. Go to the Wayback Machine. Go and look at Amazon's website back in 1997, 1998. You can do that if you're not familiar with the Wayback Machine. Go just look up Wayback Machine in your favorite search engine. Again, not going to give anybody a plug here. And then you can go back in time and look at what the website looked like at a particular day and time. Pick a date. Look at it. You won't see any wow. You won't see anything sensationalistic. You'll see something that is reflective of what somebody is trying to do and delivering on it. And that's why Amazon is where they are today. They never tried to make anything sensationalistic. They just made sure that they could provide what users were trying to do. User-centered design, UCD for the win. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what UX is about. And just like then, the people who were drowning in wow, in the cult of wow, back then, there's a lot of people today, especially with the siege that came against UX, that I talk about a lot, starting in 2011. And now history is repeating itself. And people are a lot of the visual design people that have come in and sort of taken over, and the way that everything is pivoting to product today, then you've got all these people who are going back to not knowing the history, not knowing that wow fails. The cult of wow, the cult of aesthetics fails. It fails to deliver on what users want. It fails to deliver on what users need. And then people get frustrated and they have options and are going to go and find those other options. And if those options, those people providing that option, if they followed the mindset of Amazon and taking the time to understand what people want, what they need, that's going to be where they're going to go when they make that switch today. and they're going to keep going back there because those people are going to win a customer. So the cult of wow is dangerous. So all that said, I promised that I was going to deliver a story. I was going to share a story with you. Now, I was working for a particular company, and I'm always trying to be the team player. Sometimes you really regret being a team player, and that's what happened. That sort of give me a little bit of the end from the beginning. But there was a situation where there was a team. They needed somebody on the team to help for a client. It was like a sort of an agency type of a setting that this story is happening in. And there was a customer who knew that they needed to redesign part of the site. Now, I'm going to pause right there to talk about the UX maturity aspect of that. When you redesign one part of the site and you don't design the entire site, and you're willing to have one part of the site have an experience and another part of the site to have a different experience, that disjointed type of an experience, folks, that's not good. That matter of fact, that's something that is referred to in design circles as a Frankenstein, where there's two parts, but you can tell they don't go together, and that is reflective of low UX maturity. Now, I mentioned when you look at all the different models of UX maturity, nobody ever got into the weeds about these things, and you do not want to deliver an experience that's a Frankenstein. A leg from here, to explain Frankenstein a little bit more, a leg from here, an arm from there, a head from somewhere else. None of these things actually match. None of these things actually go together. Folks, that's a Frankenstein. Nobody wants, a user does not want to have a Frankenstein experience, and you and I should not want to have a Frankenstein. We should not want to deliver a Frankenstein experience. But at any rate, we had this initial meeting, and these people were, the way that the requirements were shared, they want the site to look like this. They want the site to behave like that. And they're giving all of these, a lot of times people give requirements. They think they're requirements, but they're not. I had a conversation with somebody once, sort of embed another little bit of a story in here. And I've talked about this before, I do believe. I was having a conversation with somebody, and they kept talking about what they wanted to do in a particular initiative. And they kept talking about it, just basically giving me solutions, trying to get me to be an order taker, reflective of low UX maturity again. And I said, excuse me, do you have any requirements documented for this initiative? And the person looked at me and they scowled, and they said, the requirement is that we do it. And they walked away. Low UX maturity. Folks, whenever low UX maturity is a part of the equation, things are not going to be optimal. And when what is produced is not optimal, that does not bode well for the company, the brand associated with whatever you are doing. So I'm just pausing for the cause and wanted to mention those two different stories from two different places, but the same problem in both places. So they said that they needed to redesign this part of the site. I know, and yeah, I know somebody's thinking, Darren, what if you don't have a choice? And well, in this situation, I didn't have a choice either. So we had to deliver on this particular site. So long story short, for this part, they said, well, maybe we can get some kind of a representation to see what it would look like if we did all these different things, because we know that this part of the site delivers a really bad experience, and we need to improve on it. Not that the rest of the site, you know where I'm going. So at any rate, they started to tell me about what they were trying to accomplish, and I said, well, okay. What I'm going to do is, just based on what you said, if we're going to start with this part of the site and we're going to redesign this part of the site, this is not up for negotiation. We have to deliver. We had to redesign this part of the site. It's something that we just had to do. Not the best scenario, but it was what we had to do. And I know a lot of people, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, and that's a bad proposition, but it is what it is. So I said, okay, you know what? I understand some of what you're trying to accomplish with this part of the site. I will put together some wireframes. We can go over those wireframes to make sure we are aligned on what the architecture will look like. You were talking about how they had to improve certain aspects of the page. They knew some of the pain points of the page. And so, of course, those were part of the requirements, if you will. So I said, okay, I'll put together some wireframes. We'll go through these wireframes. We'll make sure that we're aligned, and then we'll go from there. And then I just sort of, when I said that, I just sort of perceived something that was a little off, more off than what we had already talked about. I said, okay, so you folks do know what wireframes are, right? You've looked at wireframes. Oh, yeah. And I knew when they said that, oh my God, they don't know what wireframes are. And then I also thought too, oh my God, what did I just get myself into by volunteering? I'm trying to vault the team forward. But folks, just a warning. If you're that willing person and you're willing to do what it takes to vault the team forward, I do as much as you can, check to make sure what the maturity level is on all the moving parts. Because if you understand how things are supposed to go forward, but the team doesn't understand how things, because you know how people are trying to win. We know that. That's one of the beautiful things about UX. One of the things about UX, if you are a genuine UX practitioner, if you are a pure UX practitioner, you know what winning looks like. You know what it takes to accomplish that. You know what needs to be done. The people on the team that don't know, not only do they not know what it takes to get there, they don't know or what it looks like, they don't know what it takes to get there. And when you know what you're doing and other people don't know what needs to be done, when you do what needs to be done because of the low UX maturity throughout the team, distributed, I should say, throughout the team, when you do the right thing, it's not going to be understood. It's not going to be appreciated. You're not going to get the response that you should get. There is a lot of maltreatment in UX today, folks, and it is attributed directly to poor UX maturity. It's really sad. At any rate, I go ahead and I create the wireframes. We didn't get a chance to meet, so we can get together and talk about this later. But I delivered based on a deadline that I received. I knew that it was solid. I knew that it would work. They had named another business, a competitor. They said that they wanted their site to look like that competitor. That's never a good thing. Copying off of somebody else's site is a Frankenstein move. If they created or they have errors in their execution and you copy them, you're going to have the same errors in your execution. If there is a good UX practitioner, we know, because we look at somebody else, you said that you like the experience and you look at that, that's a problem. We shouldn't do that. Here's the 5 or 10 reasons why. You're ready to explain that. If you're in an environment that has low UX maturity, it is highly likely you will never get an opportunity to explain that. That's what happened in this particular case. The stakeholders, internal stakeholders, took the design. They showed it to the external client, a sign of low UX maturity. So you got people who never understood what we were trying to do. They never understood what we were doing. They never understood what we should do. They never understood what I did do. They took what I had. They were not happy because they didn't. In order to be happy with good design, you have to have a higher level of UX maturity. When anybody evaluating work has a lower level of UX maturity, what was done will never resonate with them. They can't relate to it. It's like, you remember when you talked to kids and you tried to get the kids you put a good meal in front of them that was good for them, for a growing boy or girl. It was good for a growing child. It had all the nutritional factors. It was a balanced meal. And you put it before that kid. Something like broccoli. Kids don't usually want broccoli. They want to eat Twinkies and ice cream and all this other kind of stuff. I talked when we introduced this topic about how Maturity in real life is a fantastic metaphor. People are trying to shoot down. There are established people in UX today that are trying to shoot down the concept of UX maturity, and that is a death sentence, because real maturity in life is a phenomenal metaphor, because when you lack maturity in real life, it doesn't bode well for you when it comes to the trajectory of the well-being of that livelihood. When you have lower UX maturity, it doesn't bode well for your trajectory when it comes to trying to produce the desirable elements of UX operation, including the return on investment. When there is low UX maturity, the return on investment is going to be low. Whether it's on the practitioner, the stakeholders, external clients, whoever it is, anybody in that equation, when there's low UX maturity, that is not going to bode well for the end result. They didn't understand what I produced. Instead of waiting to talk to me, which is what, and remember I mentioned, sometimes you're working with people, I said this last week, you're working with people who have low UX maturity. You have to use, the next best thing is emotional intelligence. The next best thing is a level of professionalism. You can work with one, the other, or both, and that's how you take things forward. You don't have to work with people with high levels of UX maturity to achieve good things. But you at least have to have some professionalism. You at least have to have some higher levels of emotional intelligence. If you have no UX maturity, no professionalism, no mutual professional respect, and no emotional intelligence. So let me say this again. Low to no professionalism, mutual professional respect, low to no emotional intelligence, low to no UX maturity. That is a flat out losing proposition. You, no matter who you are and where you are in your journey as a UX professional, that is a losing proposition, folks. And that's what I found myself in this story. I didn't get to walk them through it. So they didn't understand anything. They saw what I did. We were underwhelmed. They literally said that. They took it knowing that they didn't know what they they didn't know what they had in their hand. They took it to the client. We said that we wanted it to look like that. It doesn't look like that. I don't like this. I don't like this. And now you've got these people who are in sales and marketing in this particular scenario showing, and marketing is the mortal, on average, people in marketing are the mortal enemies. Somebody's not going to like this. Again, stop shooting the messenger. Stop killing the messenger. I'm telling you facts. Now, if you can't relate to facts, you don't have a right to shoot it down. At least you can be honest and say, Darren, I don't know about that. I've never seen that. Okay, well, you don't know. Okay, well, I have been around. I have seen it. I do know it. And I respect you enough to tell you the truth. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not trying to do this to gain followers. I'm trying to do this stuff to help people. And it's true. On average, marketing people are the mortal enemies of UX. And it has been that way for a long time. If you work with marketing people and you have a good relationship, I'm happy for you. I've been privileged to have that type of an operation before, but I've worked with multiple marketing departments over the course of my career. I know other people. Remember, this is not just based on me. What the things I'm telling you, other than the story and how it was deduced, people will tell you a lot of marketing people, they hate UX with a passion. They will do everything they can to stop UX from operating. A lot of people, marketing people, think that UX research means nothing and we don't even need UX research because all they're doing is the same thing we do. Marketing research and UX research are different. The goals are different. The methodologies are not 100% aligned, but both are important. Both are important, and one should not be casting off the other. Please know and understand that. But these marketing people took this thing that I gave them that they did not understand, and they went to that external client, and they're trying to, a lot of marketing departments, a lot of them are order takers. They're going to do whatever makes the client happy. UX, we have to say and do something sometime. We have to be the one that says no. We have to be the voice of reason. We have to play good cop, bad cop, and go back and forth. Marketing departments, they don't necessarily do that. And a lot of times they won't. So when they heard from this client that the client was not happy, guess who the sacrificial lamb became? Yours truly. I became the sacrificial lamb in that case. And everybody, we were underwhelmed and they were underwhelmed. I have never seen, for the record, I have never seen a wireframe in life that overwhelmed anybody. I have never seen a wireframe in life that made somebody excited. A wireframe is like a blueprint for a building. And the only people that get excited, when I say nobody gets excited, I'm talking about clients, I'm talking about stakeholders. When I say nobody gets excited, I'm not talking about the people who do the work. I see wireframes that get excited because I understand the abstract nature of wireframes and what they are trying to communicate. So I get excited about that. Other people are not. Remember, and I said this before, I say it again, UXers, user experience professionals, we're scientists. And people don't understand what scientists do. People who don't have a strong knowledge or understanding, a high UX maturity level, are not going to be excited by the things that seasoned UX professionals produce. They get excited about things that the UI, UX people do because those things are greatly dependent upon the presentation layer, so it's pretty. The stuff that we do, if you're a pure UX practitioner, it's ugly. Nobody, that's why you see all these people, yeah, you gotta have a nice portfolio to get this job. And then it turns into a beauty contest. If you take a real UX portfolio and show all of those rudimentary types of deliverables, nobody's excited about that stuff. Talk about emotional design experience or impact. It's grayscale. It's boxes and arrows. It's nothing. And that's not going to excite anybody. So I heard somebody once, they say, oh, this is boring. It's not supposed to be exciting. What do you mean it's boring? Beware of feedback from people with low UX maturity levels, because people with low UX maturity levels, they don't have the ability to evaluate what a seasoned UX person is doing. They don't understand it. So next time somebody looks at something that a real UX person does and says that that's boring or that's exciting and I'm underwhelmed by that, ask them why and ask them to explain what UX should be producing, and watch and see, doesn't their explanation start to get into the arena of vibe coding and a whole bunch of other stuff that UX people are not responsible for. So this is a UX maturity. This whole story, this is when UX maturity goes wrong. My internal stakeholders had low UX maturity level. They couldn't, they said they knew what a wireframe was. They didn't. They wanted me to deliver mock-ups. And I delivered wireframes and they were upset. And I wanted to get buy-in on the architectural recommendations, and then we could go from there. And somebody else was going to be responsible. The marketing department was going to be responsible for delivering the higher fidelity work, not me. I was trying to make sure that we understood, because we were changing the architecture of the page. And it had to remain in alignment with some degree, or to some degree, with the rest of the site. If not, people were going to wonder if they were on the same site. And I'm aware of that psychological accountability that we had to have in the design, but nobody else considered that. So this is, again, when UX maturity goes wrong. This is what happens when you get involved with UX and the cult of wow. When people want wow, which is stupid, frankly, because UX doesn't live there. We don't live in the world of wow. And anybody who tells you that we do, they're lying, and they are misrepresenting what UX is really about. So I'm going to be the one that's going to tell you that. So you can be like other people who ignore me and then 3, 4, 5 years later find out that I was telling the truth. Or you can embrace it now and then just try to settle in, slow everything down, digest what's going on, and deliver on good user experiences, not on pretty. We're not here to make things pretty. We're not here to try to communicate about pretty. We're here to make sure, like Amazon did back in the day, UX hasn't really changed. People tell you, UX is changing. It's not. It's still about delivering sound user experiences. It was about delivering sound user experiences in 1995, 2000, 2005, 2010, 2015, 2020, 2025, and in 2026. UX is about delivering experiences that help users to accomplish their goals and meet their needs. And pretty is not part of that. Is it a good thing to have a good visual presentation? Of course it is. Everybody knows that. That's not what everybody is arguing about, though. People are trying to dismiss what I'm telling you about today. We need to be ethical about what we do and make sure to understand what users are trying to accomplish and provide a solution that can help them do exactly that. So beware of UX and the cult of wow, folks. Beware of UX and the cult of wow. They claim that UX is about wow, but that means that they have a low level of UX maturity. Everybody got it? So let's remember that on today, folks. UX is not about wow. UX is about delight, and delight is about making sure that people can do what they came to your site or your solution to do. Let's remember that today. Let's respect that today. Let's deliver on that today. So, folks, another story. Glad I didn't try to do all of these in one sitting, aren't you? Folks, that's all the time that we have today. We're going to go ahead and sign off here. So this is Darren Hood, the host of The World of UX. I hope you enjoyed this today. We'll have another story for you next week. Until next time, this is Darren Hood, the host of The World of UX, wishing everybody all the best. And until then, happy UXing, everybody.